Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Well, good morning, everybody. Happy Monday morning to all of you. I am Andrew Langer in for Larry O'Connor today. Good morning, Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Julie is recovered nicely from her trip in today. By the way, if you're all out there on the roads, I hope you're being careful. We're in studio, so we can't quite see what's going on.
A lot of people at home are probably excited. They wake up to snow.
Yes, it snowed, and also there are delays and school delays, so glad you're joining us here as you're waiting for the kids to go off to school and you can go off to work. But it is 8:07 a.m. right here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We are making sense of the news. We're going to be joined later on in the show by Congressman Ben Cline from Virginia's 6th Congressional District. I'm going to find out how much snow he got out there. They're getting out there today. But joining us right now, Tom Fitton. He is the head of Judicial Watch, a great organization doing ultra-important work in Washington, D.C. And so Tom, you guys had a bit of a victory with D.C., removing 103,000 ineligible names from the voter rolls. Listen, all I want to know is the woman who ran for governor a couple of years back in Maryland, Krish Vignarajah, is she still on the voter rolls in D.C., or is she finally on the voter rolls in Maryland only?
Well, I hope she's been removed,
yes.
depending on her state or jurisdiction of residence.
Yeah.
But I tell you, we didn't even have to sue to get these names cleaned up. We had warned and talked to D.C. about this issue. And in response, they last month sent us a letter. They said, look, we removed 65,000. They're gone. 37,000 will be gone. So it's, well over 100,000. And on top of that, over the next few years, it looks like another 73,000 are going to be removed. And, what the law is at the federal level, the National Voter Registration Act, requires states to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls. That means generally, if you don't vote in a federal election, they're supposed to ask you, knock, knock, are you still there? And if you don't answer directly or vote in the next 2 federal elections, they have to remove you. And D.C. didn't do that, evidently. And that's why we sent them a notice of violation letter, because, removing names because Judicial Watch is asking you questions, that's not a process, right? That's ad hoc. And on top of that, we have California and Illinois also not removing names in the last 2 years or so, which is obviously another major issue because the counties in California, I think, comprise of 14 million voters, and they haven't, practically speaking, the data shows they haven't done anything in the last few years. Illinois, similarly, in Chicago and Cook County, which is where the bulk of their voters are.
Well,
so we just keep on pushing, and in D.C., it led to 15% of the voter list being cleaned up.
Well, Tom, let me think. D.C., Illinois, specifically Cook County and California, what do those things have in common? Democrat, obviously, run areas. What is the consequence? Is there any consequence for these states and the District of Columbia not doing what they are federally required to do? Is there anything that can be done aside from what your wonderful organization is doing? Are there any other consequences?
Yeah, that's a good question. The consequence would be a federal lawsuit, right? And they would have to abide by the lawsuit in Kentucky. There was a consent decree. The Justice Department doesn't do this work. I mean, the law's there. The Justice Department's supposed to enforce it, but they've completely gone AWOL on this because the left doesn't want to clean up voter rolls. They don't like doing it because, in my view, they want unclean voter rolls because it provides opportunities for voter fraud. Now, the fact that these names were on the list, does it mean that they were all fraudulent voters? No. But what it does mean is they had names who were ineligible to vote. They had likely moved away or died or something like that. And that's a pool from which fraudsters can dip if they want to vote in someone else's name. especially in jurisdictions, in my view, the risk is heightened, like D.C., Illinois, California, and too many other states that don't have any voter ID. So you could show up and vote in someone else's name. It's much easier to do that without voter ID. And of course, if you're mailing in ballots, all bets are off in some of these places because they, all you have to do is sign a form or less to get your vote counted via mail.
It's interesting, Tom. Earlier on in the show, we were talking about this business owner, a guy named Bill Penzi, who runs a spice business, and I'd gotten into it with him about the issue of election integrity. This a year ago, election integrity and back and forth, and he was going on and on and on and how difficult it is for people to get out to vote and to get voter ID, and we make it impossible for them to vote. And I turned around and I asked him, I said, well, okay, you believe this, you're a business owner. Do you give your employees a day off to vote? Do you shut down your business for a day? And he never wrote me back. Thus endeth the issue. It just seems to me that what Democrats obviously use this as a pretext. Anytime you sort of poke holes in their theories about voter rolls and election integrity, they really have no place to go, do they? Except they finally have to admit that what they're doing is they have to admit that they need to make these changes, don't they?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we've settled with jurisdictions like New York City, L.A. County, the state of California. They obviously haven't followed through adequately. Jurisdictions in Pennsylvania to clean up the rolls. North Carolina, I think that was a Democrat Secretary of State. So these aren't issues where really anyone can disagree with us. I mean, New York City, thanks to Judicial Watch, moved 440,000 names. L.A. County, 1.2 million names. So we're getting the names cleaned up. And no matter who you are, Democrat or Republican, no one can argue that you leave names for forever and a day on your rolls, whether or not they're living there and haven't voted.
Yeah. We are talking with Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch. So we've got this impeachment inquiry vote coming up in the House. Your thoughts, Tom?
Oh, I'm surprised it took so long. This to me, if I were Speaker of the House or in the position influencing the House, I would have had him impeached already.
Yeah.
So the impeachment inquiry obviously is necessary, but it's not sufficient in terms of accountability. This Justice Department can't be trusted to issue a jaywalking ticket. You can see even with this Hunter Biden investigation where they list all the bribes Hunter took, but refused to prosecute him for bribes because that would bring in Joe.
Yeah.
But the indictment itself, for those of you who haven't read it, detail all the money Hunter was getting from Burisma, China, Romania, that he didn't pay taxes on, and of course left unsaid is why was he getting all that crazy money, right? And everyone knows it was because of his relationship, and they were leveraging Joe's position with Joe's acquiescence and participation to raise these monies.
What are you talking about, Tom? He's a brilliant artist. He deserves that money for his brilliance and his artistry.
Yeah, exactly. And the money. It's interesting. In Burisma, they cut his salary in half, according to the federal indictment, after Joe lost the vice presidency.
Interesting. I'm shocked. I can't imagine why they would have done it. Listen, Tom, we got to leave it there. Thank you very much for the good work that you guys are doing at Judicial Watch.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, more to come. It's 8:15 a.m. WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First on the
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
WMAL. Making sense of the headlines. Because common sense isn't so common. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Julie, talking about Saturday Night Live earlier and how great it used to be, great it once was, a storied brand. I would say that, up there in terms of newspapers that write on the business of D.C., at one time was Politico, dealing with big, thorny national issues. Julie sort of rolled her eyes at me. But at least dealing with big, important national issues and big, important candidates. People running for the United States Senate and people who are being confirmed to be ambassadors to the United Nations. But apparently they are expending bytes. We used to say they are wasting ink, using ink on a minor candidate for a state office in Virginia.
Yep.
Who was on her way to possibly winning an election until her past and her public past.
Her present.
Yes, okay, yes. But so recent issues in her life, her online behavior, online in a public forum was.
Good God, you're being so nice. Her online prostitution. Let's just say it. Okay.
Okay. Listen, we can use the libertarian vernacular. She was an online sex worker. Online sex worker.
Stop
Julie.
it.
And so but one would think that once this happened, minor office, she didn't win election.
This is Susanna Gibson. Let's just say her name. She ran in Virginia.
Yes.
Susanna Gibson, and she and her husband put up pornography on a site that was not password protected,
right.
And it was exposed. And now she is being basically Politico, I think.
Yes, Politico, yes. Politico is resurrecting her, trying to resurrect her political career.
Yes, and is doing this big, she obviously has a PR firm, and now they're doing this big, let's turn her into the victim.
Right.
The victim of revenge porn. No. You uploaded videos, pornography on a website that was publicly accessible, and you got caught.
Right. This is exactly it. There was nothing private about this. Listen, it used to be the phrase, right? It used to be the phrase, never put anything in an email. It used to be the phrase, never put anything on paper that you did not want printed on the front page of the New York Times or the Washington Post. Yeah. Then it became, don't send an email or a text message that you would not want printed on the front page of the New York Times or the Washington Post or Politico. But apparently now you can go and engage in sexual activity. Not that there's anything wrong with that. You engage in sexual activity online, and that gets posted, and all of a sudden we're supposed to be shocked, surprised, and outraged at this, and say that it's grossly unfair that this person who voluntarily did these things.
She sold videos of herself for money. Deliberately. Okay.
Yes.
And she offered to do other extreme things in private rooms. Think of this as like when you're in a Zoom meeting and then you go to a private room. She would offer to do other things for money. She is a prostitute and she is a pornographer, and she was caught. And again, now Politico white knighting this situation, running in and saying, "Oh, she's the real victim here." This is. I also want to be clear. This is part of the Democrat coalition in Virginia that wants to criminalize parents who do not immediately affirm their child's decision to identify as a different sex, which you can never change your sex, and children as young as 13 should not be cutting off their breasts or or their genitals. And she is part of this coalition of Democrats. She is an extreme leftist, anti-parent Democrat, and a dirtbag. She's not a good person. And leave it to Politico to try to resurrect her career.
Well, here's the thing, and this is one of the money quotes here. I think if I wasn't a candidate, the pros probably would have been appalled at the invasion of my privacy. But because I was a candidate, they decided that it was a political story rather than an invasion of my privacy and potentially a crime. First of all, there was no crime.
Okay,
there is no crime here. You put it up there. You uploaded these things yourself to a public website. There was no unless we want to talk about intellectual property rights theft. This is
according to the Washington Post. Okay, the Post typically does not identify victims of alleged sex crimes to protect their privacy. In this case, Gibson originally live streamed these sexual acts on a site that was not password protected. The couple had more than 5,700 followers there. Many of the videos remained available to the public on other unrestricted sites. As of Saturday, Walken said Gibson was not aware. She was not, and this is what her defense is going to say. She was not aware of that. This was a publicly available site that she uploaded these videos, and again offered to do other things with clients in private rooms.
This is like saying, well, I took these pictures and they were uploaded to a magazine, but I didn't expect other people to see them, which is an sort of an insane defense. And again, Julie and I may have some differing opinions about the overall, sort of the overall whether or not it makes her a bad person to necessarily go and do these things.
Oh my God!
But it's all right. It's all right, Julie. No, we can hold on. We can
No.
listen. It's 2023.
Oh my God! Don't even get me started on this, Andrew.
No, it's all right. No worries. But my point in the end is what we can agree on is that there was no invasion of privacy and there was no crime and that she is not a victim here. And the bottom line is if you append your name and say you're running for office, guess what? Your private life comes under scrutiny. That's the way it is. Or more to the point, your business life comes under scrutiny. That's the thing. If you went down this road and said, okay, I'm going to own it and, this stuff is out there, maybe it would be one thing. But the reality is you can't sort of go down there and claim that you're a victim of this.
It would be really nice if advocacy groups that stand up for actual victims of revenge porn or of sexual violence or of women being treated or trafficking.
Right.
Maybe those groups could come forward and say, you know what, Politico, why don't you do a 1,700 word story on some of our victims and not waste time on Susanna Gibson, who voluntarily exposed herself to 5,700 of her followers and is now acting like a victim. That's what's disgusting, is that this media outlet is actually publishing this and that these groups don't object.
Hear, hear.
That as a woman, I'm real tired of that. And we've seen that in the women's sports space. We've seen that in the fact that prisoners, males, are being put in women's prisons and women's shelters, and feminist groups are silent on that. And they're going to be silent on this.
Here. It's all about ideology uber alles. Listen, we got so much more to get to. It's 8:25 here on WMAL.
Now
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
And the boys are back in town. Hi, everybody. I'm Andrew Langer in for Larry O'Connor. Today it is 8:37 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. We are making sense of the news. Happy Monday to everybody. Hello, Julie Gudlock.
Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Andrew Langer in for Larry today. Listen, joining us right now is the congressman from the 6th Congressional District. That is a very long district, Congressman. I was down in Roanoke a few weeks back, a few months back. I was doing some camping down there. But your district stretches all the way up 81, basically, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You got listeners right now out in Winchester, out in Front Royal, driving in this morning, and glad to represent them.
I appreciate that. So listen, all kinds of things going on. We've got the latest economic news, which frankly I think is mixed. I don't see it as any great shakes. What are you hearing from your constituents about Bidenomics?
Well, they know that Bidenomics isn't working, that the spending that came after COVID has driven inflation to record levels, and they're paying the price at the pump. They're paying the price at the grocery store. Their paychecks haven't kept pace, and they are mad, and they want a control of this inflation, and we know that can only happen when we get this federal spending under control.
It's clearly there's that. We now have the CEI, the Competitive Enterprise Institute's 10,000 Commandments report. Regulations costing the average American family about $15,000 a year. NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers, their economic outlook, the impact of regulations on the economy, now just above $3 trillion here. I'm sure you're hearing about those. What are you up to on regulations these days, Congressman?
Well, we've got a bill up this week that I introduced that essentially ensures accountability in rulemaking, makes sure that when we pass rules and regulations that are going to have an impact on American businesses, workers, farmers, that they're signed off on by people who actually have been approved by the Senate, by representatives of the people. The unelected bureaucracy is promulgating regulations that are really, really raising the cost of businesses and families. And so hopefully when we get some accountability there, that'll reduce the number of regulations issued and ensure that these regulators are accountable to the people.
That's all good to hear, especially before the holidays. People are really struggling. But there's also the Biden administration's push to end coal plants. What can Congress do to push back on this? This is just going to lead to so much higher energy costs, and yet another thing Americans just can't handle.
Well, the administration, unfortunately, has gone on
green regulation binge where they're coming after not just coal, but also after your gas stove. They're coming after your light bulbs, your microwaves. It's pretty ridiculous how these standards keep increasing. And what does that mean? It means higher cost appliances, higher cost of energy for hardworking American families. And we've got to return to energy independence. We can do that with the bill we passed, H.R. 1. It was our energy independence bill. You know, we see the importance of the impact on everyday American families. And here at the holidays, we want to help. The Senate won't budge on it, just like they won't budge on the border. We passed H.R. 2 right after that earlier this year. We've been waiting on the Senate to act on the border. They haven't, so we're going to hold up everything, and that includes Ukraine money, because we shouldn't be spending money on protecting other borders until we protect our own.
Let me shift here. So we just got the Biden administration just got done with the negotiation on climate change. They used that as an opportunity to put out a huge, fundamentally flawed study on climate, but this is now the pretext for essentially ending coal power, inexpensive and reliable power, electricity generation in America. What's going on in Congress with regards to this, Congressman?
Well, the problem is that you have an unelected bureaucracy that's making rules that are contrary to the interests of the American people and to the wishes of Congress. So the Congress is at fault here because years ago they handed all this power off to the bureaucracy. They said, well, we can't worry about the minutia, so we'll give it to the executive branch. And the executive branch, to their credit, has been very aggressive in using that power. We need to take that power back. And so bills like the one I've introduced that is up this week to ensure that only Senate-confirmed appointees can issue regulations, is going to start to rein in that unaccountable executive authority.
So let's turn our attention to the other big ticket item real quick before we let you go. This impeachment inquiry resolution. What's going on? Where are you in all of this?
Well, the Judiciary Committee on which I serve under Jim Jordan has been doing a good job of working to get information from this administration. Unfortunately, the administration has not been compliant with the subpoenas. So we're going to authorize this impeachment inquiry to give it more force when we go to the courts. The courts are going to look at the vote and the fact that the House approved this inquiry, and so the administration has to comply with it. We think we're confident we have the votes. You know, we only have a couple of vote margin here in the majority, but we think that we've laid out the facts. You know, Joe Biden has received nearly $250,000 from moneyed interests through his family's shell corporations, including $20,000 from China interests. And so we need to know exactly whose interest is he representing, and get to the bottom of exactly how the money has flowed from these interests to Joe Biden.
And before we let you go, and by the way, we're talking with Congressman Ben Cline from the 6th Congressional District of Virginia. FISA reform. We're finally on the precipice of some FISA reform. Talk about that.
Well, you know, part of the problem that we've seen is the abuse of our laws that enable us to obtain data from foreigners who are possibly acting against the United States interest. When we capture those conversations, we capture conversations with Americans as well, and we need to make sure that those American conversations are protected. Those Americans have constitutional protections, so the Fourth Amendment needs to be protected. The warrants need to be obtained to get that data. That's what we're putting into the FISA process, making sure that the Constitution isn't shelved by our intelligence agencies who really have lost the trust of the American people. So putting that back in this week is going to be critical.
Well, Congressman, listen, we have to leave it there. Thank you so very much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, guys. Great to talk to you.
It's Congressman Ben Cline from the 6th Congressional District of Virginia. We got so much more coming up. It's 8:44 on WMAL. I confess that I am not someone who tracks with the royal family altogether, but I know someone who loves a good Meghan Markle story is my friend Julie Gunlock. Oh my God, why are we fascinated? Julie, why are we fascinated by these people?
I get really tired of the I'm an American, I don't care. I love this stuff. I love the fashion.
No, I'm not saying I'm
love
an
the
American.
history. No, I know. I get it. I love this stuff. I love the history and the fashion and the palaces, and I don't care. I love it. And Meghan Markle is a party pooper. She is a party pooper, and she is woke, and she's I have this running thing on Twitter where I say daughter-in-law of my nightmares, right? I worry so much that my children could bring home a Meghan Markle.
Hey, hold on. Time out for a second. I worry about the in-law thing too. I worry about or the marriage.
You need
I
to.
worry about that.
That is why I want my children to marry orphans. Because then you don't have to worry about this stuff.
Yes.
I have a whole theory on this. Seriously.
Yeah, but also, I mean, anyway? I'm sorry. Well, maybe we'll talk about this tomorrow. I want to talk about kids who date outside of our political persuasions.
Oh gosh,
anyway. We'll talk about this, but anyway, Meghan Markle.
Yes. Yeah. Do you want me to tell the story? Okay, so basically, there's a news story, and I believe it's the New York Post, page 6, that's reporting that Queen Elizabeth had a cavalry officer who was her assistant, and he was Ghanaian born, and he was sort of her assistant of some kind, and so he's black, and incredibly intelligent man. He was awarded many sort of royal awards, and he was assigned to meet with Meghan Markle when she claimed that she was feeling uncomfortable because of racism in the royal family, and the introduction of this man to her, she then claimed was racist.
Sure.
So,
yes.
And the other thing that's interesting is that she reveals that he was supposed to help her sort of with royal duties and get used to these royal duties. But she also reveals that prior to him, a woman named Lady Hussey was assigned to her, who's 82 years old. And I can understand, maybe they didn't sort of mix well together. But this is what's so interesting. And Meghan Markle claimed that she was never given any assistance, that she was just left adrift to figure it out on her own. So this, first of all, proves that was a lie, because the royal family tried valiantly to get her the assistance and sort of the official that she needed. But she was never happy.
We will come back to this in a few moments, but it's 8:53 on WMAL. Thank you, Julie. I'll be back tomorrow. Chris Plant, what do you